Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here in YouTube, you can click on the little button. It'll take you to Zoom. You can click on the little button. It'll take you to Makana. And that's where you can actually ask questions and be part of the conversation. If you think you can answer the questions, then what you want to do is join the panel. And you just have to get here a little early. 7 o'clock is when we start talking, but we actually start the mic checks at 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You got to be here by then, or we're not going to have you in today. 6 o'clock in the morning is when we open. So if you want to work on your kit, you're not sure, even if you're in the panel and you want to work on the kit and you're not sure what you want to do, then what you need to do is come in early and we'll just talk to you about it. Now, I will admit that we're a pretty hard crowd, so we're out to make you better, not make you happy. So we're, so there'll be a lot of feedback that you'll get. But that's a great place for you to kind of work through. And for all of you, if you're a panelist and you want to work through how everything's working, come in at 6 and we'll do that. At 7 o'clock, of course, we'll get back to the open Q&A. That's any question you have around media or virtual production, and we'll discuss it for the first hour. Second hour is whatever we think is something we want to talk about a little bit longer. We want to talk about one subject for a while, and that's our second hours. If you have requests for those second hours, what you want to do is ask them in the second hour suggestions or ideas in Discord. Of course, if you haven't been to Discord, you should. But we put out that link at 6:40 in the morning only, and so you need to be here by then to do it. Today we're going to talk about Telestration. I built a little app that does it, but you can also do it with iPads and any kind of drawing app. So we're going to show you just how to generally do it inside of an ATEM switcher or any switcher to make it actually work. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the future of concerts, or a possible future for the concerts, and talk about what virtual concerts might look like. Friday, of course, our own band, the Remotes, will be releasing their first song, and we'll be talking about what it took to make that. Saturday, we've got a really busy day. So we have education at 8. We've got Zoom OSC at 9. And at 10 o'clock, we start the training for Resolve. So Mark and Steve will be here with us. They're going to be answering questions. They're not going to be demoing. You're not going to be watching them. Here's how to do the thing in the edit page. What your job to do is go download their videos and watch them. We put out a coupon in the last email that will get you 50% off their video. So you can buy their Resolve 17 core training for half off. That's the deepest I think they've ever done for their training. And so watch those videos. We're going to talk, and then basically we'll have Q&A. Try to do the best you can each week, figuring out how to use it. We're going to see how this works, whether enough people take it on. But I think that when we're talking about HDR and surround, I think it's going to be important that we understand how to use Resolve for a lot of those things. And we're really fortunate to have Steve and Mark with us. So we're hoping that a lot of people will jump into that. Again, the coupon is in the emails that are going out every day this week. And then after that, it'll be over as far as the sale goes. And then for the next 5 weeks, we'll be talking about Resolve every Saturday. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and take it away.
Okay, our first question comes in from, it just says Hi Solutions. There's not a location or a person's name. So I already asked it one time, but I had to go before I got it answered and couldn't find it back. But what's the best way to sound check? Do you always need a Zoom client open to hear the end result?
It's hard to soundtrack yourself. Usually what I do is I record a Zoom meeting to sound check myself, but usually you really need somebody else to sound check you, someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, we sound check each other all the time here. You can see the meter that we have here. And so that's kind of the way we approach it. But it is hard to do a sound check on your own. If you're going just into your computer, go ahead, John.
I have a sound buddy, and since our campus, has its own Zoom messaging, we've now got a culture of, if you're shown in Zoom that you're ready, that means you're ready to do sound check. We do the recording, but like you say, it's very hard to judge yourself. So it's good to have a sound buddy.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And the fine details of sound always consistently amaze me. And it just happened the other day. Mitti, during the sound check in the morning, asked me whether or not I could tilt my microphone back. Now, understand, I do a good bit of voiceover work, so I have an expensive microphone. This is a Neumann that costs probably close to $1,000. And he said, when I brought it up, the sound quality changed that much in that much difference. It's just whether I'm exactly on diaphragm or not. And it's those little tiny nuances that I would probably, even after all these years under headphones, I'm addressing the microphone, this expensive one, differently here on office hours than I would. He heard that. I didn't even hear that. But that level of precision and understanding how to maximize sound, it just continues to amaze me. And that's why you find professionals who really know what they're doing.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City comes back with looking to standardize on a file type for playback through Zoom via PlaybackPro, Mitti, and or PlayoutBee. What are some general recommendations? Codecs, wrappers, dimensions, frame rate, and so forth.
The most portable, of course, is H.264. We do a lot of stuff with ProRes because it actually takes less CPU power. So ProRes actually will play out of a Mac more easily, even though it's a much larger file. It will actually play better than an H.264 file oftentimes. So so a lot of our base formats are ProRes if you're on a Mac. And I would not recommend PlaybackPro. It was the standard, what all of us used for a long time, but they haven't really been able to keep up with the OS updates. And so we recommend holding off on that at this point. They're not modern at this point. It's a great app. It's very sad to not have it work as well as it used to, but we have a lot of problems with it. Mitti, QLab, and then PlayoutBee. PlayoutBee, of course, you want H.264. I believe that Jonas is here. I think you need H.264 for PlayoutBee. So that would be the one that you might want to change. Frame rate, best you can do is try to match your show. so that's what you're usually trying to do is match the show frame rate so that you're not pushing something into it that doesn't match. And then resolution, we typically work at 1920 by 1080 unless we're doing a 4K show. I build everything. I build all my graphics at 2160p. Just because then I don't have to go back and rebuild them. so it's, so I tend to overbuild everything because it doesn't really take me much work to build graphics at 4K or at UHD. You can always scale them down. The bummer is when you go to 4K and then you have to rebuild all your graphics. That's a really unhappy experience a lot of times. So anyway, that's my impression. Since someone else has their hand up, let's go to the next question.
It comes from Paul Prusakowski in Gainesville, Florida. And Paul asks, for a remote studio production using multiple Blackmagic cameras on a single stage, do you need one ATEM Mini Pro per camera, or is it possible to allow concurrent multi-camera control by two remote operators?
You can definitely control. You can have up to, I think, 8 different people or 8 different devices log into an ATEM. So it'll see over the internet. You could have many people, like a lot of times we'll have somebody possibly loading media into an ATEM. We'll have somebody managing the cameras, and we'll have somebody switching the show. That's a pretty typical one. On larger ATEMs, we might even have 2 different people switching 2 different shows on the same switcher. So so there's a lot of, you definitely have concurrent sessions going on within an ATEM. For multiple cameras, you really just plug them typically all into one switcher. Anyone else? Okay, next question.
Moving next to Doug Ferguson here in the panel from Fort Wayne, Indiana, doing a stream test last night, going from my Wowza Clearcaster, sending to Restream IO. It looked great there, but checking on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, not so good. I tested at 8.0 and 4.5 megabits per second. How do I get the best quality?
Well, the first thing I would do is try pushing the Clearcaster directly to those to see what the delta is, to make sure that there's nothing going on there. I wouldn't consider Restream's preview to be super accurate. Did you, for Doug, what was exactly the issue when you say it doesn't look great?
Well, I was just looping an animation that I made, and looking at the back end of Restream looked great, but all 3 of the final destinations did not look great. It, like, you could see the aliasing on the motion, and I couldn't figure out like where the problem was. I mean, it had to be from Restream on, or if it was like the endpoint setting. So I'm not I'm not sure where the problem is, because this is where we're going with our MMA Saturday, to those
Right.
3 places.
Well, I would the first thing I would do is take Clearcaster and point it directly at those endpoints and see if it looks any different. You know, if you take Restream out of the puzzle, I would take a look at, does it look different? Because you can attach a Clearcaster, like for instance to Facebook, you can attach it directly using the API. If you just go to facebook.com/device, and you should be able to attach a Clearcaster directly to an event or to an account. And so I would test it there and with the exact same animation and see if you're getting any kind of aliasing there. And then of course, once you get to that, then you can start to think that it might be Restream. I mean, typically the way I do distribution is a little different. We've done a lot of Restream stuff, but most of my stuff is I plug it in as an RTMP input into AWS and then redistribute from there instead of Restream, because I have more control over all the encoding settings. It's a little harder to get started, but you have a lot more control over how it goes out. Jeffrey?
Once you're in Restream, you can think about going to a different RTMP. They have different locations. I know if you tried to use the Dallas one in the last week, it was on and off sporadically. So that might have been the problem. And just go for, I think there's a New York and a Chicago. So if you're on the Chicago node, go to the New York node or vice versa. See what happens.
The Dallas node, as of yesterday, was completely messed up.
I think I was on the Washington one.
I mean, Restream is basically it is an interface to AWS. so if you want it, like it's just a front end for AWS. So I just get rid of the interface and just go directly to it. I wouldn't, if I was doing anything technical, I would. I mean, Restream is great for people to get started, but I wouldn't use it. I mean, if I'm building up a capacity, I would go straight to the source as opposed to constantly working through some kind of proxy. That's my opinion
So I'm new to the Wowza Clearcaster. I just got it. And so I really haven't done a lot with it. Can it do all 3 just directly from there?
I don't think it can do all 3 at the same time. I think you'd have to RTMP from there. The Clearcasters that I've had in the past only attach. The ones that I have used in the past literally only work for Facebook, because the Clearcaster was originally just built for Facebook. And so I think the new ones are more open, but I think they can only do one session at a time. So you'd need to session them out to one Guy.
You can do 2 in universal mode, two pushes out.
Okay.
You could even do 4K. But for that device, I mean, it's meant to go to Facebook through the API. That's the benefit, because you get that direct 1920 by 1080 push in. Otherwise, you'd have to use something like vMix. But that's why you spend the big bucks to buy that thing, is to get, well, you get from teleprompter view, you get some cool little animations as people who do hearts and emojis, they'll fly across the teleprompter screen. So it's great for talent. But yeah, it's just a super stable device. And
it also,
think, Doug,
it's a different
you
tier.
bought mine, Doug. Does yours have an orange sticker on it? I think I rented that out and then it wound up in your hands somehow.
I got it from Jeff Keithley. So that might be the one. I don't know.
You own my Clearcaster now. Congratulations.
All right.
I mean, it is really built for that. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, it's a cool machine. It's to Guy's point, it's the coolest when you're attaching it directly to the services. It's probably not what I would use as a general RTMP unit. But anyway, I mean, that's just not it's not what it was designed to do. So anyway, because that's where like an elemental link would probably be better, straight into AWS and then out to everything. And you just keep on adding what you want. And the big problem you have is that when you start going, I want to go to Twitch and Facebook and YouTube. Well, they all have different ingest requirements that theoretically Wowza's handling. But if you're sending GOPs in at one rate and then Wowza's changing them, or Restream is changing them again, it's not a great experience. It's not like you're better off sending out what you need to send out the way it needs to be sent out, and then converting it to what it needs to be. So you're kind of like Xerox copying a Xerox copy to do that. So it's just something to think about. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, actually, Doug, on that, if you want to troubleshoot it, it sounds like it's transcoding up there. So if you want to, in the post show, we can jump into a breakout room and maybe see what's happening at the different data rates, because it sounds like it's going up there. Obviously, you're sending up a nice pristine signal and it's turning it around and transcoding it, but I don't think it's supposed to do that. So if you send it what it wants, it should just spit it back out, bit for bit. So
but the problem is,
and I'm not,
you have things that want different things. So you have, all three services have different requirements and what they want to get. And so the issue that you get into is that you want your mezzanine file, the ingest that you have that's going to go out to everything else that's going to be re-encoded. Because what's happening is you're sending out an RTMP to Restream, and then it is re-encoding that again to all those services, and then they are transcoding it. And so there's a bunch of copies that are happening there. And you want your typically you want your mezzanine. This is the problem with Restream, in my opinion, is that typically you want that mezzanine, that output into your first, at least your distribution, to be much higher quality than what you're actually outputting, so that it has room to work. So when you're sending it out at the same bandwidth that it's going to go out in, and then it starts getting copied, there was I think I've said this before, when I was the photo head for my yearbook when I was in high school, and on every single page of every single thing that we gave to the yearbook, it said reproduction will not improve the quality of your images. So they just want to always remind you of that. And so the thing is that you always want really, really high quality source to let that jump through it. And again, I think that the Clearcaster, it was really designed to be a server defined encoder. Which means that it checks in with the server tells it what it wants, and then it gives the server exactly what it wants. And it's really designed originally at least, designed as a service provider to these services, and specifically Facebook. So using it for other things, it doesn't, not that it can't do it, it's just that it wasn't part of the original spec. And so as a result, you're kind of using it in a way that it's not built for. So that's probably where you're going to run into some challenges here and there. Next question.
Our friend Jeff Francis from Columbia, South Carolina, here on the panel says, has anyone tested streaming from an ATEM Mini Pro via the newly released iPhone tethering connected via USB-C?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I played around with it almost immediately, and it's pretty cool. It works pretty well.
There you go. It's very scientific evidence. It's pretty cool. It's the review. All right, next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville says, question, I'd love a brief walkthrough of how the WLM meter for setting levels is configured. I want to duplicate this awesome idea.
We have to build.
I'm going to
put this in my notes so that we can just say, go to the YouTube thing.
I'm going to give it its own domain name. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, go ahead, Mickey. Do you want to explain it real quick?
Yeah, I think I went through this last week as well. But what I have here is just this device, virtual device below. Wait, I'm not pointing to it. Let me use my other mouse. There we go. All right. So I have a virtual device here that's feeding the WLM, which is this meter, and it's getting a reading directly from Zoom. And I am using OBS to screen scrape this WLM window and bring it into Zoom via the OBS virtual camera.
And he's doing that in audio hijack.
Yes, this is audio hijack. The WLM needs a host program that can run either the AU version, the AAX version, or the VST version. The audio hijack is capable of running AU plugins.
Next question.
Moving on to Sky Gleason, also here in the panel from Seattle. I'd be filming in an industrial kitchen. How do I get good audio recorded from the chef that's cooking next to a noisy kitchen fan, noisy fridge, noisy appliances, and so forth?
Stuart?
Microphone is close to the mouth, but also baffle the entrances to the fan as much as possible. You can't use the same sort of tiles that you use, like foam tiles on the wall for reflecting sound. But if you go to a hardware store and look for like a foam matting with an open sort of bubble structure, that will actually help scatter the noise and break it up a little bit.
So deflect.
But it's still got to let the airflow go through for the fan to suck the heat.
Well, I just realized the other thought would be also to deflect it. I didn't think about sound blankets, just throwing up some blankets too.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you can turn it off, turn it off. That's for refrigeration equipment, especially refrigerators and things that are nearby that you don't really see and they can be off for the duration of the show. Of course, microwaves you can't turn off, and exhaust fans, keep them off unless it's getting smoky in the room. So try and minimize by turning as much stuff off as you possibly can.
It's an industrial kitchen. There are no less than 12 refrigerator freezers. And so it's
find the breaker.
Good. Mitti?
Wow.
Yeah, you can still get it nice and clean in terms of the smoke if you say get the secondary exhaust fan and have the actual fan outside, but run the ducting going into the kitchen itself.
The big thing that we've done in industrial kitchens is moving blankets on pipes that go across. But the key is to make them full, is increase the fullness. So make them 75 to 100% full. So they're basically one moving blanket is pulled, so it's all ring. If you think of it on a ringer, like you pull together, fullness is how many, like how. So you want to pull it in. So there's lots of waves. And so it'll take a lot more of those to do it. You can do it with a curtain as well, but the sound blankets will work really well. That's going to absorb a lot. And then I would this is where things like a cedar box or a noise assist inside of a sound devices tool will do wonders, because a lot of these are constant sounds that it can actually identify and get rid of. All right, let's go to the next question. We're deep in questions.
Okay. Andy Kuckendorfer of Melbourne, Florida is up next with opinions about using Google Meet to support a live virtual show. I have an executive that wants to use Gmeet, but I have heard about bad experiences with Google Meet. Any opinions? Thanks.
As someone who's done over 1,000 events with Hangouts, Meet is not a viable, not a great, I wouldn't say it's not viable. Like you can get video out of it, but the interface is so messy that it's not a great experience to put on a screen, because they don't have a concept of full screen. They have all kinds of other things that they want to put up there. So, they kind of, they had a great product and they gutted it and built something that even they can't use very well. So I think that's the problem that Meet is in right now. It's actually a relatively good product, relatively stable, but the way the interface works to put on a screen is not something that I would put in an event. You can definitely go back and forth with people if they really want that interface. Obviously, if you're doing something with Google, then you need to use it. But I don't think there's any way to get a clean interface out of it, that's really going to remain stably clean. So that's the thing you need to know. Otherwise, it's all basic mix minuses and everything else. But I wouldn't recommend it. I would try to talk them out of it unless they have a company that makes it. So next question.
Chuck Wojak of Concord, I assume in Massachusetts. A client asked me to trim a Zoom HD cloud recording. Loading on a timeline in Resolve, realized that it was at 25p. Can I easily change that to 30 frames progressive? Do I need to? And pros and cons and workarounds.
Every company does something goofy with what they do. Like somebody gets a harebrained idea and then they imply it. And one of the goofy things that Zoom has done, Zoom is obviously what we use for a lot of things. They've done this weird thing where they decided they're just going to do everything at 25 frames a second, which I assume is just to save in bandwidth. And it's a global standard instead of the US one. But like literally everything else runs at 30 and they're running at 25. And the problem is there's no good way to get from 25 to 30. So, so the best thing to do is to typically just to transcode it. You put it into something and move it back to 30. Move it back to a normal frame rate as opposed to a messed up frame rate. And I say that not because it's international. I get a lot of international TV is all 25, but everything online except for Zoom is 30. So Facebook and YouTube and everything else, it's all standardized on a frame rate. And if we move away from Zoom for our point-to-points, it will be because of 25 frames a second, because it just messes up our entire video pipeline. Because you're streaming at 30, because Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and all these other ones are at 30. And so it's just a really funny choice. Anyway, Bill.
Also, we're just, I think, in a lucky era because the pull-ups that we can do now from frame rate conversions are much better than they were 15 years ago. And so Final Cut, Resolve, I'm sure, probably Premiere, and even likely Avid will have some function to do that transcode and bring you up to 29 or 30 frames a second, 29.97. There's better than they used to.
What's fascinating about it is you're better off with just nearest frame and just let it do it best it can. You'll use optical flow and it'll just look messy. The best way to do it, if you have access to a Teranex, is just to run it through a Teranex. So you just run it through a Teranex that's set to go in at 25 and go out at 30. And it does a better job in hardware. I know that that's a big expense to do, but it just does a better job than recompressing it in many of these other applications. Next question.
Steve Machaz of Boston, Massachusetts says, wondering what keyboard or control surfaces the Final Cut Pro and Resolve video editors are using. Standard keyboard or something specialized like the elusive DaVinci Resolve Speed Editor?
Go ahead, Jason.
Beware the siren call of too many toys. In this case, learn the normal keystrokes. Learn the normal keystrokes. The only one that I have other than Stream Decks is, a little dial thing, but I've tried to train myself to get off of it. It's just faster.
Good, Bill.
I support Jason's idea entirely. I want to be able to sit down at any keyboard in the world and edit immediately. I don't like to have outboard equipment. I don't like to, I will go as far as custom keyboard settings and putting them on a thumb drive and putting those on my keychain so I know my shortcuts are there. But outside of that, I just like using what comes with the machine because you never know when they're going to lose the machine. You're going to have to rent one and get back to work.
Go ahead, Sky.
Absolutely agree. For the editing, use your keyboard. I just started working with Luma Touch. I'm still getting my head around physically touching my monitor, which I was totally against that. But now that I'm using it, it's pretty awesome. But if you're doing color correction and you want to do it organically, the trackball concept allows you to do like 6 things at the same time once you get used to that tool. But trackballs for color correcting is magical.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the one what Sky said. Next question.
Moving on to Michael Fraley of Dallas Fort Worth. Has anyone tried or come up with a way to use Touch OSC on a larger format touchscreen monitor from a Mac?
No.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that one. I'm like, what's the...
Yep. Next question.
Jeff Francis is back from Columbia, South Carolina on the panel. Blackmagic Design Ultra Studio Monitor. Can this provide a second display or just output from certain software?
Go ahead, Jason.
It's basically the latter. Like Playout is a very specific thing. It does exactly one thing. Its job is to go out. It's not the same as a GPU.
Yeah, and it's not designed to grab onto the screen, the desktop. It's designed to be told what to put out by something else. You could theoretically have something else scrape the screen and put it out, but it wouldn't. It's really designed to be an output, as Jason said. Next question.
Sky Gleason here in the panel from Seattle. Modem. I currently rent my modem from Comcast. I've been told to buy one. Which one? If I get fiber from another internet provider, is that a different type of modem?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I have AT&T fiber, thankfully, and it's very fast and it's been very reliable for me, but they provide the modem because it's a different kind of interface. There may be some out there, but they hard brought in the modem and it has its own password. I can't even change the password. It wants to see that for the connection. So your provider may determine what you can use.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, of course, the modem couldn't be any more different. And anytime there's a new thing coming into your house, the cable or whatever company is going to insist that, there is no way to rent it. As far as which modem, Comcast doesn't standardize. The Netgear M1000, I think, is a pretty decent one. That's DOCSIS 3.2. So as long as you've got DOCSIS 3.2 or above, you're good.
All right.
Yeah,
I have surfboard. Surfboard is what I've been told.
Yeah, I have an Aris surfboard. Works really well. So I mean that's and it's definitely the performance was better, and I really don't like using the Comcast modems because they're putting they may basically build like this Wi-Fi mesh that everyone's using, and I don't care how secure they tell me it is. It just seems like a crazy idea that I don't want to participate in. So that's why I got rid of their modem.
And that's like the $89 one. And then you do have
paid.
You have to do a bridge out the back because it's only got one Ethernet adapter.
That's okay. The two should be different devices. That is really important.
Yeah, mine was like $150.
Copy that. Thank you.
Next question.
Moving on to Philip Oler of Katona, New York. ATEM Mini ISO with audio set to AFV, audio follows video, input 1 only. For some reason, audio didn't record on ISO file until input 1 was selected for the program. Shouldn't it record audio and video regardless of what's on program?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if that's the case, if that's what happened, that's a horrible bug. You would expect your ISO recordings to treat things like as if it's raw. So you don't want to do anything to it. And the fact that it's stripping audio from it when it's not enabled, when audio isn't enabled, I think that's a bug.
Yeah, it does sound like it's a bug related to audio follows video, that it's turning it off on the way through. So I think that sounds like the problem. I mean, you want it for the show, but it sounds like if you turned off audio follows video, it'd probably record all the ISOs. Go ahead, Jason.
If you had well, yes, unless audio follows video was on the main bus, in which case that could be your issue.
But I think that having audio follows video on is what's causing that to happen. I don't think it should. I don't think that's the behavior that it should occur, but I think that that's what's happening on your record. Next question.
Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland says, question about Logitech Brio. When using the Brio webcam with the Zoom, does it make any difference running in 4K or full HD in the Logi Capture app?
I don't really use the Logi Capture app. So I think that typically if you're going into Zoom isn't going to use 4K. So by putting it 1080p, I think if you went to 4K, you'll lose your ability to do pan and scan. So I think that if you have it set to 1080, then it's using the 4K image and you're able to pan and scan inside of that 4K frame. And then that's why, I mean, so I think I would set it to 1080, but we haven't, generally most of us just have it route the Brio directly into Zoom and possibly use some other control. The capture hasn't been a great experience for a lot of us. Next question.
Comes to us from Tim McAlpine in Chilliwack, California. Studio control room settings signal chain question. Blackmagic design video smart hub 40 by 40 before or after a Blackmagic design constellation. Upgrading a 20 by 20 that's currently placed after. And
before.
Chilliwack, Canada, not California. I'm sorry.
No, we don't need to annotate that. It's before. You always put the router in before, so that you can get to everything. You can send it out everywhere outside of that. It's more complicated with the constellation because there's so many inputs. So you really can't serve it up. So you may end up routing around it. So you may put a lot of your core stuff into a 40 by 40 and then like only put 20 inputs from the router to the switcher. And then the other ones might go directly in. Otherwise you'll use up all of your router. This is a real problem for Blackmagic right now, is that there's no 4K solution over 40 by 40. And it's with the constellation.
They made a router size switcher. Like that's the problem.
Well, yeah, but we always put it in before. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would dare to say that like it depends on his use case. Because say, for example, if he needs to feed his program out to multiple locations, he might want to utilize the router both before and after the.
Well, we definitely do it before and after. I mean, so the way the router is your heart. So you move everything into it, you go into the constellation, and then you'll take eight or 10 outs from the constellation, put it back into the router, and then the router has outputs from there. So yeah, you're always connecting the switcher, but very rarely, or I try to avoid when I can. Now, I know this will sound crazy, but I have a tendency to have other than one or two routes to that router, I'll have two routers because the constellation is so big. So the inputs are coming in from one router and the outputs are going to another router, which is then doing distribution. Otherwise you run out of outputs. So I have two routers with the constellations, and then to make it more complicated, we patch all of those with cross patches so that you can manually repatch things so that you can extend the capability of the routers. Otherwise, if you hard connect them, then it becomes a thing. So we're in a situation right now where the Blackmagic's router supply is problematic. But I would put all your inputs, all your major inputs into the router first, because you may want to put them somewhere else. You put them on a monitor, you don't want them to be connected to the switcher. You also, if you have a backup switcher, you want them to go into the router so you can take it to the backup switcher if something goes wrong. Next question.
Christian Pelving in Sweden says, does anybody have a good source for statistics on what we do? The increase in live streaming events, high-end webinars, and hybrid events, looking back a couple of years to 2018 to 2021, and if possible, looking forward to 2022 for our industry.
I don't know if we have statistics yet, like hard numbers, but anecdotally, of course, it's spiked. I mean, it's a massive increase in streaming, which is exactly what happened in 2008 as well. Live streaming tends to be a counter-cyclical business. Go ahead, Bill.
In my experience, those statistics are available, but generally they're aggregated and sold by, at least here in America, by relatively large research firms. And if you're not a subscriber to them, you don't get access to them. Occasionally, if you work in an industry, like when I was in radio, you would get deeper than just the Arbitron and Nielsen ratings, but you need to go through somebody.
Usually have to look for news articles that'll expose some of those hard statistics on the research. So I don't have the actual numbers if you're trying to put it in a business plan, but I think that most people understand that there's been a massive shift, and very few people think that the shift will go back to normal, which it didn't. When we had a downturn in 2000, live streaming began. When we had a downstream in 2008, I know my business doubled every year for years after that. So, and then, then we get to a point where things are fine. We think we can do whatever we want. Then we have another downturn, and usually streaming moves up another notch because people are trying to do more with less. And so we should expect to see it. I bet you we see it jump. My guess is 5 to 10 times over the last year what it was before, and it'll probably drop back a little bit, but not significantly. And it's just going to keep on going down that path because of the multipliers. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland says, what's the difference between audio plugin formats, AU, VST, that sort of thing?
Mickey?
Yeah, it essentially varies from host to host. Like Pro Tools uses AAX plugins. Majority of Apple workstations use AU plugins, like say that's what Logic uses, for example. And VSTs, what's a good example of something that uses VSTs? Live.
Reaper.
Audition.
Reaper uses, yeah. So it just varies from host to host what formats they support.
You want to add to that, Jeff?
AU is just Apple, so that's Apple audio units. So that's.
But most of the Apple will see VST as well, right? I mean, it's. I believe.
Not natively, no. Really?
Right.
Well, most manufacturers will make plugins in multiple formats.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Well,
and you get all of them.
But we're going to keep moving because we're deep in questions. I'm trying to keep up. So if you for the panelists, when we're deep in questions, if you raise your hand after Bill finishes the question, chances of me calling you on it are pretty low because I'm just trying to move fast. All right, you have to really read the question ahead and or listen to Bill and raise your hand almost immediately. Next question.
Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland says, another Brio questions. Can you output 1080p but pan the center crop around the 4K sensor? I don't see how to do this in the Logi Capture app. Sorry.
Yeah, one thing to always say when you're putting those in is whether you're using a Mac or a PC. So on a PC, I don't know how to do this. There's very few apps that are available to control webcams on the PC. So you may have to use the Logi Capture to do that. On the Mac, there is manual camera and webcam settings, and those will allow you to do exactly what you're talking about. Even with 1080p cameras, they'll look a little zoomed in, but they'll let you pan and scan around the camera. And so those are the controls that you want there. Next question.
Ken Jordan of Epsom in the UK says, is the Logitech 4K Pro magnetic webcam for Pro Display XDR for sale on the Apple website the same as the Logitech Brio webcam?
Yes. Sensor's the same, operation's the same. It just snaps onto the monitor. Next question.
Moving on, Steve Bauer in Seattle. Alex, would you please once again show us the wired solution to the Bluetooth adapter that you showed on MacBreak Weekly yesterday? I don't have a power over Ethernet and would like to know all the adapters to use.
I don't have it set up right now because I actually just cleaned my desk so I could do what I was about to do in the second hour. Basically, it is it's not cheaper. I will say that. So, well, it'd be cheaper for you to get powered over Ethernet than to do what I do. What I'm doing is I have a USB to a USB Pre 2, which is like $900. The USB Pre 2 then it's easy for me to get. I have an XLR and headphone jack converter to a TRRS for the phone. I then go through a phone adapter to a Lightning. So Lightning to TRRS to a splitter that splits out to a headphone jack and to a XLR for input. I then take that XLR input and I plug it into the output of the USB Pre 2. You can also use like a Pod DI. Would probably do the same thing out of the headphone jack. It won't be as good, but it'll work. And then that's how I'm pulling that output from there. I don't have it's actually for me, and I think it'd be about the same. Doing that solution would be about the same price as buying all the things you need to do it with Dante. so I think that's. But the Pod DI could probably save you a bunch of money to do that as well. Next question.
Jeff Francis, Columbia, South Carolina, back with any thoughts regarding the announcement from Fry's Electronics ceasing operations today?
I was surprised that they had made it so far. Like it was just like, are they still, it was just like, I was like, wow, they're the hard part is it's those stores on low margin are, they have so much overhead. They have leases for all those stores. They have electricity. They have contracts. They have employees. You can't go all the way down to the number of people that you need to survive. And there's no margin to make up for all of those things. And so I was just surprised that they had made it as far as they did. I've spent so much money there that it was sad to see it go. John and then Sky.
So we have a big giant Fry's here in Vegas. 2 years ago, I walked in there. It was a ghost town. And I posted a video on Facebook, and I talked to the manager. I said, "When you guys closing down?" "Oh, we're not closing down. They're sending inventory from the other stores, and we're minimizing." But I guess today's the final day. Rest in peace. Long live Amazon.
Yeah, I think it was hard for them to keep up with that. But there was something about being able to have somewhere in the city. I knew where every Fry's was in every city that I went into. I've been to the Vegas one many times to solve problems for shows, but there was always the problem is they were so big, they were off in some distant area to find, except, the one that was really convenient is Burbank is right next to the airport. So I'd come out of a rental car and go right there and pick up some little thing that I needed or whatever. And so that was very convenient there. Go ahead, Sky.
And yes, rest in peace. But what other store is themed? Because you've got a spaceship sticking out of the one in Burbank. You've got the Santa Ana one with the whole not Wizard of Oz, it was Alice in Wonderland. And here in Seattle, I went at Christmas time, and yes, it was, as stated, a ghost town with that huge store and a little tiny item. It's
a word of warning to people who try to hang on to their old business model. They think that it's working well and they don't move off of it. Best Buy had its best year in 25 years, I think, because they had embraced online, and Fry's was, you could do it online, but it was very uncomfortable. And I think that's the issue is they didn't evolve. And I think as people who work in events, for physical events, I would look at this as a warning to hanging on to a business model that you really want to hang on to, and it worked in the past, and it isn't going to work. We might go back to some version of online events, but they are going to die mostly in the next decade. And so you're on the sinking ship as opposed to the ship moving forward. And so you just have to. This is what happens when you don't move forward. Courtney.
Yeah, I'm going to miss them. There's not going to be a place you can go in and get something immediately. But Fry's always had a mysterious pricing problem that I always hated them for. Everything in the store was really list price unless it was on sale. And so you had to watch the sales, that day's sales, to find stuff at a decent price. Otherwise, you're paying MSRP. And I think that's what killed them.
it was like a convention where you could go in and play with things, like look at them and like, is this really going to work? That was the big thing over Amazon for me, was I could fiddle with ideas.
But they wouldn't let you take pictures inside the store. That drove me nuts for doing stuff for commercials and stuff. I want to take pictures for things they want to use as props and stuff. No, we can't. They'll usher you out of the store if you take a picture inside.
Huh. I did it all the time. So I must have been just lucky.
I did it too.
Next question.
Norma HS in San Jose says, Alex, how do you write and draw over live video and training materials with a Wacom tablet when zooming? Which model?
Wait 10 minutes. That's what I'm talking about in the second half. So your question is perfect, and I'm going to talk about it in 10 minutes. And I have some specific software I use, but you can definitely, I'm going to show you how to do it with an iPad and with a computer. Next question.
Fred Eric Eckert of Bad Herrenalb, Germany, says the Privet Shield agreement between the US and EU was canceled last June. That made it impossible for me to use Zoom in local communities or sensible business situations. Is Zoom working on a solution on that matter?
Go ahead, Jason.
It's a matter of, he means Privacy Shield, and that's a matter of treaty. So Zoom can't really do much of anything, if I understand it correctly, about that directly.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with what that is actually. So you've gotten outside of my knowledge, my knowledge net. Next question.
High Solutions is back with, is it possible to open Zoom meetings to Zoom OSC by link instead of the normal Zoom app? Oh, it's Thierry Wilders in the Netherlands. I'm sorry. Thank you for adding your name.
By the way, if you're in Mukana, I think you can open up the little hamburger and change your screen name. So if you're having trouble with that, that's where you do that. I don't know enough about that startup process, but what I would do is I'd bring that question on Saturday morning, because Andy Carluccio will be here, and our last hour with Andy. I mean, I think Andy's going to come back, once a month or something like that, and keep answering questions for us as we keep on working through it. But I would ask on Saturday morning. Next question.
Michael Patrick in Chicago says, how do you estimate how long a project will take to edit? And then he's talking about a video edit.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, first thing you do is get a script or at least a treatment or something. You cannot, people always say how much for a 6-minute video. It is absolutely impossible to estimate just based on time. Everything has to be taken into consideration. How many locations, how many cameras, how many people. It's an endless process. But if you have experience in a long time, you have certain things that you're going to have personnel, how many hours they have to be there, what their rate is. And most of us use a spreadsheet or something like that to calculate our estimates based on real world numbers that we have experienced with.
Go ahead, Sky.
TQR, time quality resources. You got to get that from the client. At what level do they want each of those? So get an example of something they like and then reverse engineer it. And then you can hopefully give them a best guess and also leave yourself a margin of flexibility if possible.
One of the things that you really want to think about is trying, as you're getting into editing, is to try to edit a lot for other people, build things, build your own things. You got to get a sense of how long it's really going to take to do it, and really try to track your hours on what it took. I mean, I think the thing that caught me the most is realizing that, oh, wow, there is 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours of setup before I even start editing. And if I don't do that, then there's days of trying to unwrap the spaghetti that I created. And so there's, so you want to calculate all those setup hours. The basic thing that I do is I look at it. I think about the ones I've done in the past that are like it. Shorter videos from more content takes longer than longer videos from, like, if you have a 35-minute piece that they want to go down to 20, that's not a big cut. If you have a 35-minute piece that they want to go down to 3 minutes, they'll think that it's less because it's 3 minutes instead of 20, but it's more because you're making more choices. And so that's the thing to think about. But then I usually calculate exactly what I think it's going to take to edit it, and then I quadruple that number, and that's usually what I calculate. Because it just always takes more time. One thing to remember is when we put into our contracts, we usually say the number of revisions, and there's a little word that we use that says non-recursive edits. Non-recursive edits means that if you give me a set of fixes, the only thing that you can fix in the next round is stuff that was in there. So you can't add new things. Now, So when we say we're going to do non-recursive edits, it means that you have to put all the things that you want to fix, into that. If the new set of, when you see the next revision, if you want us to refine what we did with that, it's part of that revision. But if you pull in something that is you've now decided you wanted to do again, then that's going to be a change order. And so now you can, and so you set that up because otherwise, people get good ideas all the way to the end. And that becomes so. Usually, we do like 2 or 3 rounds of non-recursive edits. Is kind of how we define that. Next question.
Tyler Darlington of San Diego says, from OBS, I've found that most UVC capture cards do not natively output at 709. Are there some 1080p capture cards anyone knows of that natively output at 709? I found that many UVC capture cards output at 601.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Blackmagic Duo 2s do 709 beautifully all day, every day.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather of Melbourne, Australia, with potentially frightening for young cinematographers, favorite method of cleaning the oil and dust off a camera sensor. Ooh, delicate. After all, it's just a piece of glass in front of the actual sensor, and I think Stuart's being a little silly there.
I can tell you how I clean it off. eBay. So anyway, like that's
how you clean it out of inventory. Okay,
that's if I get anything serious on my sensor, a little bit of dust here and there is fine. But if I get anything serious on my sensor, I usually that's the end of the camera from a production perspective for me. I clean it as best I can and then I sell it. For me, once there's that kind, and anyone who's worked with me knows that I am maniacal about it. Like if you open a camera, if it takes you more than 5 seconds to swap a lens, or if you leave a lens exposed for more than 5 seconds, the back end of the lens, you will get hellfire from me, like very, very quickly, especially if it's an expensive lens. When I swap lenses, I set the camera down, I loosen the cap, I loosen this cap, and then I open the two and I close it. And I try to do it in less than a second because I never want to do what you're just talking about. Go ahead, Stuart.
So you're never going to use the wipes that you can get for the sensors on the end of the stick or anything like that?
I have, and I've had mixed results. I definitely have used them a lot, but there's always like 5 or 10% of the time that something is never quite right after that. So I won't swap. I generally, in a dirty environment, I won't swap lenses. Not outside. I'll go into a clean environment to swap lenses. So we build a tent that is, that's air conditioning. It's got a little cleaner. If you're going to swap a lens off of a camera, I won't let people do it in the wild because the thing that I'm most concerned about is scratching the lens and scratching the sensor are the two things that I'm just, I did the very first time I did use one of those little swabs, I scratched the sensor and that was pretty much it. So because you have to blow it first and really try to get everything out. And then you try to do a soft vacuum and then you go through and you push it out so that, because any of those hard particulates, if they get pulled along with your brush, you are, it comes across the sensor. And so yeah, I don't, if I have to go to that point, that's pretty much the last time I'm going to use that camera. Bill?
It's so important that some cameras even have a little ultrasonic shaker that shakes dust off. So you have to less go in and remove dust and things like that. But yeah, if you see somebody take a lens off a camera, they don't have another lens within easy reach. That's the last time they ever touch the camera.
What's the last time you're my camera operator for me? Because camera operators can get really lazy about it and they'll just take the lens off and they've got things hanging out and they've got all this stuff. And I'm just like, that's not my crew to do that. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just one little note of keeping dust off the sensor. And it follows on with what Bill was just saying about the vibration of the ultrasonic motors, that most of the cameras that have got that are the ones that will do tilt and shift for your optical steady shot. But if you put the camera in the bag and the camera is facing lens down, dust falls off the sensor when the sensor is discharged from any electrostatic charge on it while it's operating.
Good, Jason.
Yeah, and here's a no duh kind of a comment. Since we all now have masks for COVID, don't sneeze anywhere near your sensor. Put on a mask if you're going to take the lens off. I learned to do this on stage. Not wearing a mask, but I learned to change lenses on stage because for those of you who don't know, smoke machines are really dirty.
Next question.
Tony Adamopoulos in Missouri says, budget audio interface for mostly voice spoken. He's looking at the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, Motu M2 are your only choices. Which one and why? Also, what should a newbie look for in a spec sheet when evaluating these interfaces?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Either one will be fine. Most important thing is going to be getting the microphone in the right spot, closer to your mouth, and then what microphone are you using? So if you're using something with a low output, it's probably neither of these are going to have enough gain. Given that choice, I would probably pick the M2 for the better metering that's on the front of them.
I'll choose at that price. I'll choose anything over the Scarlett because it's probably the Scarlett still exists as the one piece of hardware that has dragged more of my time working with remote artists on Zoom, where it's just randomly doesn't work, and it's just days of my life gone to that piece of that box. So I probably run into less Motus, but the Motus have always worked. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland says, what are the pitfalls to watch out for when using several USB webcam inputs at the same time?
Go ahead, Jason.
You will end up confusing your operating system, and you will almost certainly start messing up the hub protocol. So it'll lose track, and then you'll be angry because I'm clicking this, but why isn't it doing that? The answer is because you've plugged it and unplugged it too much. Universal serial bus is not designed to get multiplied like an AC adapter.
One thing that it's one of the few places that I mix and match cameras is if I use a bunch of webcams in a single computer, I often use different webcams, like different brand. I look at which one do I want to use for this. So I might use a Brio and then a Huddle for a close-up cam, and then something, a 920, because it's easier for the operating system to know and the editing systems to know which one is which. Otherwise, they show up to it all as 920s or all as Brios, and I've had more trouble with that as far as separating those things out. You can't really name them permanently, or that I know of. So so it's hard to identify them. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, one thing you may run into is you may start saturating your USB bus. So if you can spread them out between different USB controllers, that would be a lot safer.
Yeah, Courtney?
Just what Mickey said, I was going to say the same thing. Saturation of the USB bus. You might, if your computer is not a Mac, or if it has USB ports on either side, split the sides because they're usually on different USB controllers and they're different pipelines.
Next question.
Christian Pelving is back from Sweden with, do Blackmagic or any other video mixer have the option to live call connect as the TriCaster 2 has to get individual source feeds for each person on a remote from Zoom or Teams or so forth? And any other easy solutions for individual source feeds for participants on remotes?
Go ahead, Jason.
If you're using fiber, you absolutely can. It's not an all-in-one solution, and a TriCaster isn't a switcher. It's a Windows machine.
Yeah, I mean, you can use, vMix has vCall. Mimo Live has its own WebRTC service, and then what we use is hardware. So we have a machine for every person that we want to talk to, and then we get those ISOs back into our switcher. If you really think about it, buying an ATEM Extreme with a bunch of little computers that can all tie into them is actually less expensive than buying a TriCaster. Yeah, so that's the thing to think about there. The power of a TriCaster is it can do a lot of stuff all in one machine. The danger of a TriCaster is your entire show is in one Windows box, and you're putting your entire event, your audio, your video, your connections, and that may seem convenient, but boy, some of the most hair-raising experiences of my life have been sitting behind someone using a TriCaster. So I just want to make sure you're clear, like really, really scary events, with a TriCaster. So when it doesn't work, it really is a problem because your entire system is all based on it. Go ahead, John.
I have the TC1 just like Doug has. And did you guys try Live Call Connect with Leo's new Elite the other day when you were having problems with Skype?
No, we used OBS Ninja.
Yeah, I understand. I thought you might try that out because I haven't even tried that out yet to see how well it works.
I'm resistant to turning Skype on. So when it wasn't working, I was like, I don't want to play anymore. So like, just give me something, so I think that's my experience a couple of weeks ago with Twit or with MacBreak might be the last time I use Skype. I mean, because it just made a decision on my operating system that for whatever reason, I mean, I'm using Zoom all day, every day, and it works just fine. And for whatever reason, Skype was literally pushing 50K a second, like just would not. And I was in super low res mode and I couldn't figure out why it was doing that. And Leo couldn't figure it out. I had never seen that before. And I just was like, okay, enough, you know? And so, I'm pretty much unwilling to, I'm about to take it off all my machines and just like tell people that I have a technical problem with Skype and I can't connect to that. We'll have to find another way to meet. Doug.
Yeah, with my TriCaster, I don't let it do anything but change sources.
That's the whole thing. I know a lot of people that are like that. Like, don't let the TriCaster play back. Don't let the TriCaster do it. And I was like, well, if you're doing that, why not just have an ATEM? Like, if all you're doing is cutting between sources, like, why do we
spend a lot of money already?
Really expensive.
Yeah. Next question.
And our second to the last one comes from Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois, who says, when consulting on projects, how do you quote it? Is there a retainer fee or do you do it as an hourly kind of rate thing? If so, what would you charge for the retainer and hourly fee?
I'll be honest with you. I try to do everything as a quote for an entire project. And I do it the best I can to get to one number. Here's what we're going to do. This is how much it's going to cost. And you know, I don't do that with every client. When they're really, really big jobs, it's really hard to separate those things out. But in smaller jobs, like sub $20,000 jobs, I try to get to a point where there's as few numbers as a few list numbers as possible, because the reality is it's never going to be those numbers anyway. And so, so the idea is that I have a product that I'm agreeing to sell you at this price. I'm taking the risk that I might lose money on it, or I might gain money on it. But we're all going to agree that that's what the number is, that it's worth it to you to do it, and it's worth it for me to do it. And then we go ahead and move forward rather than digging into all these little numbers. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to say something that'll shock people, and don't worry about it. And here's why I'm saying that. You get paid versus how well you can solve problems that have economic impact for people. We do all these sheets and this number of cameras at this thing because it's important to follow the metrics to keep your business in line and stuff like that. But the bottom line is your reputation is going to be how much you can charge. Because 10 people can do exactly the same jobs, and one will be paid 1/1000th of the one the other was. And the reason that person at the top of that heap gets paid 1,000 times more is because people have come to feel that they are trustworthy to deliver the results they want. You don't give a $300 million movie to somebody without a track record. And it's the same thing. It's hard when you're starting out because you don't have much track record, and you're going to try to rely on, what's the area charging for a camera operator, but it's going to wildly vary on your area. In Los Angeles, you'll cost different than you will in Denver. And everything is flexible, but what isn't flexible and what you can control is how hard you work and how your reputation gets built and how you protect it so that you constantly are the go-to person. That's what drives your rates up, not how many cameras and what kind they are.
Good, Courtney.
And if you're in a union, what I've always done is build it as a minimum consulting days. If they want to have me come in and consult for a few hours in a meeting or something, I'll bill them a flat scale day, union day, because if you're in the union, you have to work a certain number of hours to qualify for health care and pension and all that. And so you have to meet a certain annual minimum. So if you can build up your union hours, it's better than to charge them just a flat consulting fee or something that doesn't count toward your union hours. So if you're in the union, I bill them as a flat day.
I don't
minimum call day.
I don't bill less than a day. Like, I don't bill per hour. Now I might spread that day over, like, oh, we're going to commit to a day and I might put 2 hours in, 2 hours there, whatever. But again, that's not really a day. I just say, well, that's going to be $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 for the consulting for this over the next couple of weeks. And I bill it out. I, to be honest with you, the hourly numbers, no matter how high they are, they're too low for me to want to track them. I just don't want to, I don't want to track the numbers. And so, so I'd rather just have a whole number that I have to work with. And again, I think that to some degree, it's, where you are, what the market will bear, what makes it worth it for you to do it. At the beginning, you're going to make a lot less money because you don't know what it costs. You don't know what it takes to do it. And you're going to take on jobs that just take more hours. That's why when you give a whole number, you're learning, You said, okay, I'm going to do this for $1,000 or $5,000, and you're learning how to do that. And so they're not paying for you to learn; they're paying for you to do it. And so, so the thing is that you, even if you lost money over time, if it's just your time, it's a little easier. Almost everything I've done starts free because I need to figure it out. I don't like people being upset that they paid for something and didn't get it. So I do almost everything that I'm trying to figure out, I do for free. And then I just keep on ratcheting up as I figure it out. So now I usually push most of our clients to spend more than they expected, but then the product comes out higher level. I mean, there's just no way to do it for less, really. So you have to, but you have to sell them on that idea that it's going to be better. And it usually is, because you had more resources, you had better people, and you had, you know, those things are improved over what would have been possible at half the cost or whatever. Sky.
So my question is, we used to be able to charge for deliverables, which was a hard, videotapes, and you would make money on the margins of the duplication, et cetera. Now that we don't have that as a resource, that is one of my questions. My other question is,
I never charge for that, by the way, ever.
Tape stock?
There's no time in the history of that I've ever done it. I think it's probably why I got so many clients, is I just didn't nickel and dime anybody. So they paid for something, and they would just get drives, they would get things, they would get like all
built
those.
In. It was built into your price.
It was hugely disruptive, because they were used to, just so you know, like that, the fact that people were charging for tapes was really, really good for me, because when I didn't do that, I do everything I can do to avoid change orders, little charges, little things that ratchet up, little things that catch up with you. I'll do everything I can possibly do to not encumber the client that way, where I charge enough at the beginning that it's just enough that I figure out a way to do it as cheaply as possible on my end, to make sure that it's something that is manageable on my end, and the client has one number that it just took to do it. People think that they should bid low and then nickel and dime all the way back up to where they wanted to go. And that creates an enormous amount of stress for the client, because it's just this constant because here's what happens is they make choices not to do things that are good for what they're doing, because they have to go through, especially in corporate, they have to go through another round of approvals to get that next thing, or to get that, or that's another charge that they're going to have to fill out a form on, and they're going to have to do a bunch of other things, even if it's a small number. So I believe that one of the reasons that I was able to so quickly take clients from other people, which, if you hire me to work for a client, I'll never take the client. I'm like religious about that. But everybody else, I mean, if someone doesn't hire me to do it, everybody's clients are mine. If I don't have a relationship with that company, if I have a relationship with a company, then I stay away from their clients, because it's a big bowl. But if I don't, and one of the things that I do is that I try to make it as easy for the client as possible, in that area. And I think that we got a lot of them because clients would just get used to the fact that with us, it was just easy. It was just easy to, to make that work. And because I can tell you from the client side, all those tape charges and everything else drove them absolutely crazy. Like they just hated it. And so that's not a place to find money, in my opinion. Like that's the value add, to what you're doing. Jason, and then Mickey, and then Stuart. We're going a little over because I don't think it'll take me very long to show you this telestrator. We've got a couple extra questions here. Go ahead.
This is extremely rare in tech, but 98% of my revenue is, and I don't mean my profit, I mean my revenue is just my advice. It is my advice. 2% maybe. It is exceedingly rare that I ever am in a place where I have to bill a client for something physical. If it's hardware and they need it, I'll recommend it, but that's what they're paying for.
Good. Mickey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, for me, like for production work, like actually being on location and doing sound, always a daily rate, never a half day rate, unless the same client can provide me another half day project on the same day. Because I will be, never a half day rate, always a full day, no matter how, like maximum of 12 hours. But even if they only take up 3 hours to shoot a quick interview, still a full day rate. But for post work in the studio, if it's a very short term thing, wherein like say they just want to come in, record some VO for two hours, then I charge for an hourly rate for that, for both the rental of the studio, which also includes engineer or engineers. But if it's a longer term project, like a full show, a full season of a show, or a full feature film, then we quote a full project rate for that, which although it does include like a time frame, like only until a certain point. Like if they keep on dilly-dallying and taking so long with getting the cut to us, there's a limit to that of a certain date.
I would never do that to you. Anyway, Stuart.
A couple of quick points. Firstly, just following on what Mickey's just said there, 2 clients in one day is a bad idea. If you have an issue on the first one that can affect the second one, you lose the second one. If you have an issue on the first one and it runs over, you've lost the second one. It's not worth burning somebody for that. But on Alex's point earlier about looking after your clients and all that stress and what have you, one of the easy ways to get rid of people's stress and make them feel confident is just say, no, there's no charge for that. That's included free. That's part of the package. And people love that. They're no longer having to think about it. There was one third point I was going to make, but it's lost my mind. So I shall cede the airtime to somebody else.
Let's go to the next. I think it's the last question before we get to the second hour.
Stuart ceding the next question to himself, because he asked, in the vein of the new Sony phone with HDMI in, what Android tablets can do video in via HDMI to USB-C as a connection?
Is that Sony phone shipping?
I love seeing Sony phones on film, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of neat. Never see it.
No, but the new Sony phone that has HDMI in and HDMI out, I'm super excited about. But I what's funny is when it came out, I was like, this is the most exciting phone in the world, and then I forgot about it. Like I just want that was a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, and I don't think it stayed present for me that it was even out there. So I think that's always the challenge. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know of any other one other than the phone itself. I mean, I don't know of anything else that does that. And I still don't know whether, I think the thing that was left open for me is like, specifically will TikTok and Instagram see the HDMI input natively as a phone camera? Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to look at B&H, the Sony Xperia Pro is in stock at the B&H for $2,500 US.
Now I have to find an excuse for it.
That's the sound of Alex's credit card shivering.
Yeah, it's shivering. It's not smoking yet. It's just like it's like rattling, and there's like something going on in there that it wants to go in. But the problem is it's that or a teleprompter. It's like I can't buy both. I can buy a good new Prompter People 24-inch teleprompter, or I can get that, and then I'll have to go build the teleprompter, which I could do. But it's I just don't. I got to decide how much I want to put into the construction project. All right, so we're gonna change that. I just realized Nate has his hand up, and even though I think he was probably late. Nate was probably late. That's why let's let him in for the second hour. I just noticed it was there. Sorry, Nate. Anyway, but yeah, we're pretty hard about the 6:43 or when we start the mic checks, because otherwise we bring people in and at the end and it creates chaos. And I see we were upholding the rules for Nate as well, or he's gone now. There he is. So, anyway, and I don't see the participants after when we start the show. I try to minimize the number of things on my screen so I don't get distracted, because I'm so easily distracted. So
Alex, I don't see any co-hosts except for Mickey.
I thought there were more. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is how to do. Let's see if I can. Let's see here. Let me just give me 1 second. Pop this up. Okay. Now, what we want to do is, there I am. I'm white. All right. So
we all saw white.
So what we want to do is what we're going to talk about right now is basically being able to do a key. So let's see if I draw it. And I had it all set up, of course, and now it's not doing what I expected to. So just give me 1 second here. Let's see if we have this. I think I switched my cameras. Hold on.
Hey, since we're doing a little housekeeping here and filling time, Alex, I just noted that I have a thing at 8:45 that I have to leave a little early for. And I was only concerned about, and the only reason I brought it up is I don't see Guy or any of the other normal people who take the con.
I'll sort the questions.
Can you do that plus what you're doing? Great. Okay.
So this is the, so what I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about what I'm doing and talk about building telestrators. And you can do this with any drawing app that you can get largely clear screen. So all you need to do is have it. So let me show you. I'm going to cut to the screen that I'm creating. So what we want to be able to do, this is John Edelson showed a one on glass, but what I mostly wanted to be able to do is do something that looks like this, right? So while I'm talking, I can start talking about this, and I find this to be, it's my version of the glass, right?
And on Saturday during the office at hour, I'll do a demo with the glass. So something to look forward to.
So, but with the glass, if I want to draw on something or I want to pop it in, now there's a lot of erasing going on with the glass, and I just push a button. so anyway, so for me, what I wanted to be able to do is put anything into it and then be able to draw over top of that. So if I want to draw over my video here, but I could draw on anything that's coming into an ATEM. So you can have multiple, especially, this is why I'm so excited about the Extreme, is that I'm going to be able to save all those out. And what's kind of cool about it is not only can I save everything out with the Extreme, but remember that when I show you this, that one of the ISO records can be the telestration. So the telestration is actually on its own layer. That's being recorded so that you can go back and fix it or take it out or fade it in and out if you want to. So there's a bunch of advantages to that process. And so let me show you what I'm doing here and how we're making it work. So this is what I'm using is a Wacom tablet. The Wacom tablets now, I'm using the older version, which is $1,200. They're now $450 or $400. And so they've dropped in price. The key is actually the way the telestrator is being used. So I'm just going to draw it out here for you. So what happens is that I feel like the way to use this is to show it. So what you have is you have a Wacom tablet. And then you have, and I can, let me change the color there just to make it a little darker here. It's a little light. So I'm going to go into my colors and we're going to make just a little darker. There we go. So we have a Wacom tablet, and the Wacom tablet, and then we have a computer. We'll just call it a Mac Mini, but it can be any other computer that you have there. I think that it could even be something like, again, all the things that we could do with Courtney's B that I haven't done yet. So anyway, so you have anything that has a drawing app. Now the Wacom tablet has, when it comes out, it has three things. It has power. And then it has an HDMI, and that is an HDMI in, so that it can, because the one that I'm using is a Cintiq. So this is it's a Wacom Cintiq. You can use, there's cheaper ones out there to use, but I use the Wacom tablet because it works the best. And then it has USB. Now the USB is how the cursor. So this cursor has to go into that. So it needs a USB, and that USB goes into the computer. Then we have an ATEM Mini, or your switcher. So what you're doing now, typically you're just working between this computer and the Cintiq. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to put the switcher in the middle. So we take the HDMI out of the Mini and we put it into the switcher. Then we take the HDMI that goes into the Cintiq and we come out of the switcher and into there. So the Cintiq, what I'm seeing is the result of the composite that's being created in the switcher. And that is kind of the key to the operation. So the Mini goes out and goes in, but the USB from the Cintiq goes straight into the Mini. So the information about where the cursor is coming from the Cintiq to the Mini. Then what I'm doing is I'm going out of my switcher And then what that means is when I get to the end of that, what I can see is now I see myself. I see what I'm drawing on my Cintiq, and I'm able to simply, I want to, outline this area here and draw over it. I can see what I'm looking at, and I'm doing that while I'm seated. I'm not doing it I'm not doing anything that I have to try to figure out. It also means that I can have multiple cameras. And again, and this is why because I have this tool is why because I use it this way is why I get so aggressive about analog versions of this, is because I'm not limited by camera. So if I want to cut to another camera, I don't have one plugged in at the moment, but if I want to cut to any camera, I can cut to any camera in this system, and my draw over just sits on top of those cameras. So now I can, if I want to cut to a computer, if I want to cut to whatever I want to talk to, I can circle any part of an interface, anything else is all fair game. Go ahead, Mickey.
So are you just essentially doing a Luma key on the HDMI coming from the computer and getting rid of the white?
That's exactly what I'm doing. So I'll show you. Let me show you what that looks like here inside of the switcher, and then John, I'll jump to your question here. So so I'm using a downstream key. The downstream key, of course, is the Luma key, and let me share this screen with you here. Oh, you need to make me a co-host. I'm not a co-host for my show. We do that on purpose. And I was going to feed this out into the switcher, and anyways, long story. But what I'm using is my telestrator hadn't been open for a long time, and if you open a Mac after like a month of it sitting closed, it takes like a couple hours for it to find its way back to like everything's been updated now. So anyway, so if you look at this here, what I have is the way this works is that, of course, my downstream key is on air. I have a fill source, which is my color. So it's not a camera source. This is what everyone gets confused by. So I have a color that is the fill source. The key source is my camera. And then in this case, that camera is the HDMI from my computer. That's it. You got to turn off pre-multiply. And then what clip-in gain will do is, as you move those, if you create a soft brush, so you don't use a hard brush, you use a soft brush in your drawing application, the clip-in gain will let you play with the thickness and the hardness of the edge. And it makes it, in my opinion, look much nicer than generally what you see on a telestrator, which is usually very aliased. So most telestrators tend to be aliased because they're just pixel on, pixel off. This lets you create kind of your own look. And so if I go back to this and show you that that process. So if I'm drawing here and I have those circles, now if I play with you can see how I'm making it thicker and thicker. That's me moving the clip, right? So I'm moving my clip of that screen, and here I'm moving the gain. And the gain is really, it's mixing the two of them together to get, but what I'm able to do is, rather than just having it be a pen, I really have artistic control. And the key with this is to do it as a soft brush, as opposed to a hard brush. And this is what almost everybody misses when they make telestrators. And so by doing that as a soft source, I'm able to sit there and control, how just that fine feel of how it looks. And again, I can do it. I don't have to worry about where my camera is, or I don't have to worry about whiteboards. Once I started doing it this way, I literally stopped thinking about ever talking physically, because I'm sitting in a chair and we're talking, and I just go, okay, well, let me circle this and talk about it. And it's not a very expensive solution. The solution of this with a Mac Mini and an ATEM, we'll just say the whole thing. Mac Mini is, let's say, $600. And you could probably, again, I think you could do it with Courtney's. You just need to get the drawing app that'll work on it. Then the ATEM Mini, any Mini, $300, and the Wacom tablet, $700. So you're talking about $1,000 for this, and then it cuts over top of a whole bunch of things, and it's at your leisure without any setup, without any other things like that. So it works pretty well, and it obviously works really well when you have a lot of inputs. One of the other things that we do is that the Skype, I don't have it set up for this right now, but you can take any input. So I've had classes where they're showing me the camera shot that they're learning on. They've got an Sony F3 feeding me the camera shot back. I'm sending them a feed back to them that's showing up on a big screen in Rwanda, and I'm able to draw on top of it. Like, you got too much headspace here. You got to cut this down here. So, because you have all those inputs, coming in, and any one of them, this is basically a transparency. It's a multimedia transparency. A lot of us are old enough to remember the little transparencies that our teachers use with an overhead. This is that concept, except that everything sitting underneath it it can be video, stills. And the place what's interesting is what people really got into is doing this over top of their presentations, because they can sit there and draw on top of their keynote. Now, you can do that right now. You can do that in Keynote, but imagine being able to do it over anything as you're talking. So I can cut over a video, I can cut over a close-up, I can cut back to my keynote, and I can draw on any of it anytime I want. Courtney, and then John, and then Courtney, or John, and then Courtney, and then Jason.
I'm gonna have to figure out how to incorporate this with the light board. But so is that?
I don't understand it. I don't understand. Like, this is because, and I felt like it was timed well because you were showing the light board, and so I immediately just went to, I got to show the telestrator next week, because you have to understand why I'm so aggressively I don't get it, because for me, I'm like, why would I want to have all that? Because the problem is that you have to get your camera in the right place, and you have to get the light board, and the light board can only be a certain size, and you can only draw on the light board. My whole thing is that I can just put this up there and then just draw on it. I'm
not complaining, but I like this. So the question I have is that Mini dedicated to this? Is there a way you could do the one Mini by using the full screen output to select what goes to your telestrator?
You could probably, I have never done that. So you could have two video outs of your computer, and one being one monitor that you want to work with, and another one being the other app if it filled up a second window. So you probably do it with one computer. I've never done that, because for me, I just, I throw hardware at things because I just want them to do the thing that I told them to do. And so for me, I have usually a Mac Mini that's dedicated to this, and I have another Mac Mini usually that's dedicated to selecting the sources, that I have, which is another app and things and everything else. And so and again, any drawing app, that the only problem you have with drawing apps in general is that they have some kind of interface. So that's the only thing you have to figure out how to get around. The one that I use that I'm showing you here is one that I made that doesn't have anything, doesn't have any interface.
I agree that not having iteration, but think of it this way, Alex. That's a really good piece of plexiglass in front of the teacher. It could be used for COVID and drawing.
Okay, there's your point. It's a COVID thing, but see, mine keeps the teacher out of the same state. You don't need to. I can. And anyway, Courtney, and then Jason.
It's a spit shield and a telestrator. A couple of points I wanted to check with you didn't mention is the color that you selected in the fill. I think is that 100% white, and then I noticed you had invert key checked in the Luma key.
Yeah, so that's because if I reverse it, it just reverses it. So what happens is that.
And the other question is, and you'll probably get to this, is what's the background of the graphic that you're drawing onto?
Right. So I'm drawing onto, if I just go purely to, let me turn off my key.
Yeah, if you select the output of your panel.
I'm going to turn off my key here. And then I'm going to cut to it. So that's all I'm outputting. So, so I'm just doing black over white. That's all. The whole drawing thing is just black over white.
Okay, so the color in the choice is the color of the line that you're drawing, and that's inserted in the black area.
So the color is when I go back to me and I turn on my keyer, if we go back, the fill source, the color source is a color defined by the switcher. And what's nice about that is I can change it anytime really interactively. I don't have to go to some interface and figure it out. All I'm generating, now if I made it white over black, I wouldn't have to invert the key, but because I can invert the key, the reason I leave it this way is because if I want to do an illustration where I just talk to you about something and I want to draw, this is how this works, right? By turning off the key, by not having the key on, for instance, it's just black over white, right? And I'm just going, this is what I want to do. This is how this works.
So it just becomes a whiteboard.
It's just a whiteboard. So it cuts to that whiteboard immediately. So having it just white over black, but if I swapped it, it would just be the other way around. But I invert the key. I like whiteboards instead of blackboards, and so that's why I do it that way. Yeah, go ahead, Jason, and then Mickey, and then Tyler.
So what does the Cintiq see? Is the Cintiq seeing program out?
Yes. So what you're seeing,
I just had to be sure about that.
Yep. So the USB-C is sending program to Zoom, which is what you're seeing. The HDMI is going out of the and this is one of the things that makes this so great is the fact that it's so much simpler with the ATEM Mini than it was with the bigger switchers that I had, because
no conversion.
There's no conversion. So I was losing about 200 to 300 milliseconds going in and out of decimators. So before this, I had to go. That's why I've been building these other things, is that for teaching, most of your sources are HDMI, not SDI. And so these little ATEM Minis, while cheaper, what they're really powerful for me is the fact that I can plug HDMI sources in. So I can plug in presentation tools, other computers, things that I want to show. All those things are really easy for me to plug in. But yeah, so the program is going out to the switcher, and that way I see a composited finished version in my ATEM. So it's WYSIWYG. I can see what I'm doing. And again, over top of the analog version, all you're doing with the analog version is drawing on glass. What I'm doing is drawing on everything that I can pump into my ATEM Mini. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, a bunch of my questions were actually answered with Courtney's questions. But I guess, I was wondering, if you want to draw in multiple colors, I guess you can easily switch that, and instead of doing a fill using a color source, you could just
you could. So I will admit that I just don't. And you're right, and the way I would do that is I would start creating colors for it. What I found, if you have two keyers, you could do it also that way. But you'd have to have it. It would be more complicated. You'd really have to source it from the keyer. I went through doing colors, and what I found was that there was a lot of problems with that. To do the key at that point, you still can do it, but then you do it really over black, and then you do pre-multiplied, and then you do, so you set up a different approach to it. And what I found is that I just never used it. So the earlier versions definitely had that. And I found that I didn't really care, because here's the problem is I was jumping over so many sources, and what I needed was a neutral color that would work everywhere. And I would look at my content and make that decision. But I thought that I wanted to use it. I just never actually did, and then I thought to myself, when I was using blackboards or whiteboards, I'm not one of those people that uses colored markers. So I just use black all the time because it's more readable. So I had a problem as a student. I really hated when teachers use multiple colors, because if they didn't use them well, it made my little OCD thing go crazy. And so I wouldn't, even in high school, I just didn't like the wrong colors being integrated with each other. And so I always went to, the way I annotate everything is black, this function is probably more driven from my tendencies to hate that process than any technical limitation. But again, it just doesn't do it because I don't need it. Tyler, and then Courtney, and then John. We'll come back to you, Mickey.
Does the ATEM Mini support an alpha key, and do you foresee a way of using a Wacom? I don't know if it's an HDMI 2.1 where there's some sort of pass of an alpha channel, but where you can kind of get more finer detail of those hard edges and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can absolutely put out a key fill output, and that would be a place that you would go eventually. One of the things that I have found as a teacher is that adding more features basically made it more complicated for me to think about. So most of the tools that I build as a teacher, that I'm going to actually use, have the least amount of interface and the least amount of it's minimal viable product to get done what I want to get done, so that I don't have to think about it while I'm talking. So you'll notice here, I do everything I can to not answer, not be the one answering the questions, not being the one that that does this thing. We hand that stuff off so that I can be present. Like everyone, like Mickey will tell you, like, I don't check my text messages. I don't check my Discord. I don't look at my email. Like when we're doing office hours, that's what I'm doing. And everyone in my company knows that there's no way to get a hold of me during the show. In the same sense, the problem with almost every telestrator is the fact that there are so many buttons on it. You know, and so the thing is that there's colors and there's things and there's shapes and everything else. And over time, over the last decade of using this telestrator, I learned that I just want to be able to draw. Like I don't need it to be more than that. And when I build more than that into it, because I was like, oh, I had a version of this that would do, like, you could build shapes and you could do this. And I found that it became something that you constantly could hear me. If you were a student in my virtual class, you'd hear me going, not, I wouldn't say it out loud, but it was a whole bunch of commas. So as a presenter, when you're the reason I build a lot of these tools is to, as a presenter, I want as few commas in my presentation as possible. And so anytime you add features to this, you add commas to how you're interacting with the students. And so you want it to be as fluid as possible. Even the stuff like at the beginning, because this isn't, I took my normal system and took it to the office and then decided to do up here today. That little beginning piece, drives me crazy. And what you'll find is that as I finish these kits that I'm building in my office and in my house, once they get into Unity and they're both the same, that I'll be using this all the time as I talk to you guys. But I figured I'd show it to you so that we don't have a bunch of questions about it later every time I use it. Good, Courtney.
I noticed in the program that you wrote to do the drawing with, we don't see your cursor. And if we don't have the Wacom Cintiq, could you just draw on the screen if you had a program where you see the mouse cursor or the pen cursor so you know where you're going to be drawing that line? But I noticed in your example, we never see a cursor. We only see the output of the line. Did you do that by design, or?
Yeah,
so that
I did it by design because it's being keyed in. So I don't want you to see the cursor. I actually purposely took it out. I mean, the earlier versions had a cursor. And I took that out because this is a very feature-based, like it works with a Wacom tablet, or it works with a tablet that you can pipe in. And now these video-based tablets start at $200 or $300. I think that's why Wacom had to drop their price down to $400, $450, is because there was a huge number of Chinese manufacturers that were putting them out at $250, $300, $350. Wacom got close enough to it. And the reality is that the Wacom solution at $450 is way better than the Chinese ones that are just $100 less. It's not worth even looking. I mean, I bought them all. So as someone who's done this, I bought them all. I used them all. The Wacom tablet is way better. What's interesting is that the $450 one is actually easier to use than the more expensive Cintiq because they built a new interface with USB-C. It's not the weird little pins. And I've used this system on Wacoms that I started with a 21-inch Wacom to do this with years ago and a decade ago. And so I've been slowly refining it down smaller and smaller and smaller to where we're at now. But if you don't see it, you can also, I don't know if I can easily do this, but you can use, the other thing that I've used in a pinch is Keynote, and you just have a white slate and you just draw on Keynote and its HDMI comes up, but it's a presentation. I just create a white presentation that I just keep on changing. There's like 40 white slides and I just change them. But to that point, I don't see the video coming back in. So I have to kind of know where I'm drawing. It's not nearly as accurate and it's not as fluid. You know, everything that I'm working on, what I consider the next generation of presentation, the next generation of teaching, is to reduce the friction between the analog world and the digital world. So it's not to increase the friction by making it more complicated, but how do we make it so that we as analog beings can fluidly interact with the digital stuff in front of us? So a lot of this is I tend to remove interface, remove complexity, remove options, so that it's just a fluid thing that you don't, like, this thing doesn't take any time to learn. I don't have to teach you how to use it. Go ahead, John.
So I'm that professor that you hated because I always had the 4 colors.
Right.
Because I would be putting the syntax up in black. I do variables in another color and use another color for flowing when I was doing on whiteboards or even when I was doing. So can this do that, or you're only stuck with one color?
Right now you're stuck with one color. it's been a request, so it's definitely something I'm researching. To do that, you really do need to go back to key fill, which is what was being talked about. I think Tyler brought up or whatever. You need a key fill, because then I really have to have full control over the composite, so that I can select those colors. It would actually work. I mean, I've thought about it, and it would actually. Again, it became too much GAC for me, but now with the ATEM, I actually think that what's going to open it up for me is the ATEM Extreme, to wanting to do that, because now if I do key fill out, you would be able to, on a larger Wacom tablet that has the multiple selections, or if you had a Stream Deck next to it, you could have a Stream Deck that was literally the colors that you wanted, and just tap on them, and that color would be the next thing your pen drew, and it would be all. So you would be able to do that swap. It's just not. Yeah. It's not in the feature set.
Not every
right
student hated it. I mean, we were always stealing the markers from other classrooms, and when I only had one, that's all I would use. But when students realized I only used a marker if I only had that, they would steal them for other classrooms.
Right.
So we would always have the 4 colors. If you get used to it, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. And so, again, because of every product is a function of the main user's workflow. Because my workflow doesn't include that, it hasn't, because usually if I have to do anything complex, so if I have something that is complex enough that I would need multiple colors, I make a keynote file. So like for me, I think that's the function, that the reason that I don't need colors is because if I'm going to draw anything complex, I don't do it interactively. I animate it all in Keynote and have things pop up as I talk. And then I draw on top of it with this. So the idea is like, so I have this, what's kind of ninja when you get into this is is when you have a Keynote file. I think I can pull one up here. Hold on. Go ahead. I think Mickey and then Jason.
Yeah, I guess like one thing you can do to do the multiple colors is have the same HDMI as both the key and also the fill, and you get rid of the white and the colors just shine through. Of course, you have to do the colors within the computer itself.
Well, and the colors, the problem with that is the color will become part of the key, so you'll get like a semi-transparent, which might be work, but you get kind of a semi-transparent look.
Yeah, you might have a
black background.
Yeah, you might have a relatively less number of colors that you can pick, I guess. Like, if your background is white, you can't go for like really bright colors. Or
so like
and the
this
inverse.
This is an example of, if I switch to this and I have it on, I can say, okay, so like this is how I would look at it here, where where we're talking about the interface here, and we're talking about this here, and we can talk about what that actually looks like. And then if we go to the next one here, and you can say, okay, well, this was my lighting source. These are the 2 lighting sources here. We had a camera source here, and of course we put a camera right in front. That's getting this here. So this is how I, inside of a Keynote, this is how I might use it. So we were doing surround sound, so you can see these here. This is actually 2 4K images that are going into a switch.
And then you can switch the color on those if you want, just using the color.
Right. And then, and so with any of these, when you're drawing through these, so if I'm doing something complex, I'm going to do it in Keynote, where I would draw out, like if you were for what you're talking about, I would never do anything. Again, my handwriting is so bad also that I would never put anything in that people had to remember with my handwriting. So what I do is I want to put that all into a presentation doc and have those things appear. And then I want to circle them and annotate them and do arrows to them and do all that. And the other thing that it does do, though, is that when I'm responding to the reason that this is so important is that when I'm responding to a student, I'm able to go off the rails. Like if you only have the Keynote, then you can't. This is why people want to do presentations and then do Q&A, is because they're limited by, they can't do anything because they're in the Keynote presentation mode. By having Keynote as another input, and then having, let's say if I'm talking about Cinema 4D or I'm talking about something else, I have the app that I want to talk about. I have a camera that I want to talk about. I have me, and I have a whiteboard. And so I can sit there and cut between those, and I'm not going out of the Keynote mode. I'm not going out of Cinema 4D. I'm not going out of any of those things. I'm just switching between them, circling whatever I want to circle at that moment. and then coming back into it. And when you start doing that all together, it becomes a useful thing. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, let me back you up here. There's quite a bit of research to support what Alex is saying. The hardest thing to ask a human brain to do is to switch context. It's not that it can't be done. It's that the idea is the context switch will break your stream of consciousness, hence the Q&A afterwards, because this is all rote. It might as well be playback. Like, that's the point, is to make the interface disappear so that you can stay in flow without any context change.
Well, and the interesting thing is that I thought it would be the artists. I did an event for a company that was a really big broadcast company, and we made this available, and we thought it would be the artists who are talking about the new branding and everything else that would really get into the pen. But they were kind of like, oh, this isn't as good as what I do in Photoshop. So they just didn't really touch it. The people who went crazy were the financial folks, because they could finally, after all these years, circle their Excel file. It was so funny. Like, they were just obsessed. Like, they were like, oh my gosh. And they were like sitting there drawing and talking about this equation and going down and moving it over. And they were, and they had never seen, they didn't see it until that moment, you know, and they were draw, rise over, run over things over, you know, this and put it all in right over top of their Excel. And so it was the opposite of what I expected. The non-artists just loved the idea that they finally were not contained to their Excel file that they were using. And so having that ability to annotate, and then having that ability to quickly jump to a whiteboard is pretty life changing. Now I know that because I was closing the windows here, I closed away from the question and answer, which I'm sure we somehow stacked up here. So I apologize. Let me get back into the operating thing here. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. All right, so let's jump into some of the questions here. Kyle said, is there a version of this using the iPad instead of the Wacom tablet? And the answer is yes, Keynote. Like, I don't have another way to do it. There's no way. Here's the problem with the iPad at the moment, is getting video back into it. So there's not any way to do it with a heads-up display. You absolutely can do it with an art. You can do it the way you would do it with old Wacom tablets, which is that you just have to get your hand-eye coordination, because all you're doing is drawing black over white. So you could do that in an art pad, or I just use Keynote. So if I set this to, let's see if I had one up here. So I somehow lost one that I built. I don't know exactly how that happens. Anyway, but you set the Keynote slides to white, and you set your pen to black, and then you just pipe in, you put 40 white slides, and then you just run Keynote out to your switcher, USB-C to HDMI into your ATEM, and then you have something that you can draw on top of it or cut to it. What you don't have in that environment is the ability to see what you're doing unless you're doing a whiteboard. So that's the limitation to that technique, but it definitely does work. It's just a matter of not getting the video in, because it's complicated. You need to get the video in, but you don't want to put the video out. So I don't want to send the video, the composited frame, back out of the iPad either. I want to send black and white out of the iPad, but get in video, and that's the trick that we're doing with the Wacom tablet. Dave Chalmers from Glasgow, Scotland said, presumably you could do this with a normal tablet, just looking at the screen rather than a Cintiq. Absolutely. If you're used to using that, what I found is that it just felt more natural. This gets back into me wanting to reduce friction for myself, where it just felt more natural for me to do it. But if you're comfortable, I grew up using I've been using some version of a drawing tablet since the early 90s. So I can definitely sit there, and once I've done it for a little while without the Cintiq, the problem is I've used the Cintiq for the last 10 years because it's so much more fluid. But you absolutely can just use you can use a Bamboo, or the cheapest little $99 one, and it'll totally work to do this on some kind of little art pad. Go ahead, John.
After you showed this to us last year, I did exactly that with my iPad. But Alex is absolutely right. Having the video on the screen is way more ergonomic.
Yeah.
Well, and the ISO is the magic of being able to do this. Like, that's just going to be awesome.
I mean, because if you do this, if you have it going out, what you're able to do then is you can record all those ISOs, rekey it, and turn everything on and off as needed, and also save out the frames if you wanted to, of things that you wrote if for some reason that's valuable. Go ahead, Tyler.
Any idea how to get video into the iPad, or how to
if I
talk to the powers that be to request it?
There's ways to do it. I just haven't had the programming backup to do it yet. So go ahead, John, and then Jason.
So after I failed with my iPad experiment, I tried out the new tech Telestrator.
Yeah.
But once again, there's interface stuff all over, and it's expensive too. It's like $500. But that's a solution that has the video that you can draw over the top.
Yep. And it may be because you have to have a PC for that. That's just the software, right?
Correct.
So you're really talking about it.
Yeah.
And so it's cool. It's just that it's I don't actually feel like I have as much control, and I have more interface to it. I played with it a little bit and I was like, oh, I'd rather have mine. Jason.
I mean, again, it could be done in Mac OS with an iPad in tablet mode, because Mac OS natively supports that, and it would have to be coded, and it would be a pain in the butt, and no one's done it. So there it is.
Yep. Tony Mobley said, can you do this with an iPad? Yeah, as a drawing device. Yeah, so that's the keynote is what I've been doing to do that. Go ahead, Tyler.
So what about like a dongle where, HDMI out, HDMI in, or does the OS just simply not support it?
No, the OS would
probably desktop. Yeah,
you could definitely do it. It's just that it would take. It's not trivial. Like doing it with a Mac Mini and a Wacom tablet is trivial. Like there's no extra things to do. You can use any drawing app that goes full screen. You can draw on it. You can figure that out. So it's trivial to do it with a Mac Mini, and it's probably $20,000 to $50,000 of R&D to do it out of a iPad. So that's the issue right now. Eddie Martinez says, do you choose the Wacom tablet over the iPad due to price? No, just due to what we just talked about. Just that it's not trivial to get in and out of the iPad. Jonas Tatel says, is your app native Mac OS app, or is it built on a platform that could be reused in Windows or Linux? It's not very hard. This is a native Mac app, but it's not. I don't think it would be difficult, and people want to work with me on that. We can talk about it because I would love to get it on multiple things. I don't have the time to put out a stable app. Like this works. The one that I have works for me, but I wouldn't make it a product because then I'd have to support it, and it doesn't. It can be a little flaky at times. So finding. You'll find that anybody that runs into me that says they're a programmer will eventually get me to go, hey, do you program? Like I'll ask them, because I'm always trying to find someone to partner with to actually finish. I have like a decade of apps in my head for teaching and presentation and everything else. I just don't have any programmers. And so I hack through it and, kind of work through it, as best I can. Norma High School in San Jose says, which draw app do you like with brushes that you like? Again, I think that other ones that I've used that are not the simple one that I have is Procreate. I think works relatively well. The hardest part is getting rid of all the interface. You'll end up with like a little nub at the corner or something like that. So I think Procreate, and I think Autodesk had one that I've used in the past, but I've had this for a couple years now, so I don't know what the most current ones are. But go ahead, John.
+1 on the Procreate. That's what I used. And I used a green background, and I chroma keyed it out. So that's how I did it.
Yep. James from Dublin, Ireland says, HDMI out of the Mac Mini, can it be split to an Ultra Studio recorder and to an HDMI or a 1080p monitor? What splitter would you suggest? You definitely can do that. I don't know which one. I don't know which one that I would
like. Anyone
monoprice splitter is probably fine, but it's just a black and white image. There's nothing special about it. When you start doing key fill, it gets more complicated because those have to be synced up. So it's a little bit little trickier, but in its base unit, it's not that big of a deal. Ed Wolfstein from Burlington, Vermont says, was planning to buy a larger Cintiq Pro 24. Would this work pretty much the same? Heard you mention the USB-C. Newer models might not work as well. No, it works on every Cintiq. It works well. I think I've owned almost every Cintiq that they've ever made, and the only thing I've done with them is this. So it's like in this mission, it does it pretty well. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, one of the magics of Wacom is they have a patent on the way that they scale the desktop to any one of the surfaces that they have. So that's why it's intuitive, and it's also why it's worth another $100.
Yeah, the Eddie Martinez pointed out that the Creative Pen display is $400, the 16 Cintiq is $650, and the 22 is $1,200. Man, that's come down a lot since when we first started. Any of those will work. They all work. It's just a matter of size. The advantage of the larger ones, the 22 is just because it's larger, but I actually found that to be more difficult to use in the way that I did it, because it took up a lot of space and I didn't need it. So the 22 took more space than I needed. So I ended up, I had one, and that's what I used originally. And I found that it wasn't. In fact, there was a point where the one advantage of the 22 is if you go back and look at not MacBreak, but the Final Cut virtual user groups, all 6 of the folks that are sitting around the table, all 5 sitting around the table, have a 22-inch Wacom tablet using this product on top of them. Or I think it was at the time it was Procreate on top of them. And what we did there is we actually had all of them going to one computer that could draw. And then they all got video back from a Final Cut back to all of them. So we had a shared surface. So you have 5 people sharing Final Cut. So if we jump to Mike Matzdorf or to Steve Martin or to Mark, they could control Final Cut, and they could also, all of them could control Final Cut, and all of them could draw on top of it. And so that was, that's when you get into some very meta possibilities. And the answer that someone's going to ask, the answer is yes, you can draw over something like Zoom over top of another image. So you can bring people in remotely to draw on top of the thing. Go ahead, John.
Does Frame.io have annotation tools built in?
It does. Yep, absolutely. You can definitely you don't need this to do, offline annotation. Frame.io does that pretty well. In fact, it does it really well. This is still a little bit more fluid. So this is what I use. This system that I have here is what I use when I do teardowns. So when I do the teardowns that you've seen, if you go to the Pixel Core channel or whatever, you'll see teardowns. Those teardowns are all done with this system, where the only difference here is that computer, the underlying computer, is just it's QuickTime, that we're playing back. Just doing a playback. Go ahead. I'm just doing JKL in a full screen QuickTime that I'm just moving through. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, along the same lines, I was just thinking that this would be a great tool to use for remote VFX review sessions, where I want blur here, I want this,
Yep. So Frame.io does that. Cinesync will do it in real time. So you're playing back and you're looking at it, you can annotate it. So there are definitely tools out there that do those online. And then this one's nice because it does it in the same room. Most of those other ones are cloud. And so for some folks, they don't want to go out of the building. And so, but there's a bunch of tools. A lot of the visual effects firms have programmers that know a lot about graphics. And so the result is that most of them have some version of this that's built into the system. So Digital Domain, ILM, they have all their own annotation systems that are built into that they can provide for that. It's the online stuff that makes a difference. Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman in New York says, with Wacom tablet, is the drawing resolution fine enough for drawing? Teachers could use it for teaching drawing techniques. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a 1080p. You can absolutely teach drawing techniques. Could you? Yeah. I mean, if you can see it on a 1080p screen, you could make it that resolution as far as teaching those techniques. I'm using it as a markup, but if you just cut to it, you could just cut to Procreate or cut to something else and have someone draw with all the brushes and all the things. Like this is annotating, but you could just show the screen and then just draw on it. And so it's actually, and then if you want to get crazy, you have a computer that has just trying to think about how that would work. You could, with 2 Wacom tablets, you could have your painting and your annotation. I don't think you could do it with one. So you'd be painting on one of them into one computer and annotating over top of it on another computer. So imagine drawing something and then annotating what you drew and why you drew it. Like it would, you can start stacking these things up. And again, because you have a switcher, there's all these things that you can kind of start integrating together but this is why this was a contributor to why the guys used to call my home office it got its name as called the array, because I just kept on adding monitors and kept on adding. I had at one point I had 3 Wacom tablets and 12 other monitors that had all kinds of different data and so on. So I'm already up to, I somehow simplified, and right now I'm at 6 or 7 monitors at the moment. I keep on adding monitors again, no matter how many. I try to go down to 1, and then I just keep on adding more. So anyway, hopefully that was, I didn't think I could cover a whole hour. To me, it's a very simple thing because I've been using it for so long, and I was just like, oh, you just do the thing, and then you do the thing. But anyway, and so hopefully I'm working on trying to get it out, getting something out so that people can use it more readily. So we'll see how that goes soon. Anyway, that's it. Thank you again to everyone for coming. It's always good to see everybody, and another good day. They all seem to be good days. I don't know exactly how we've somehow figured out how to do this over and over again. I think we had hard days in the early days, but I don't think we've had hard days in a long time. It just feels like a fun thing to do. So it's always a pleasure, never an effort. And I look forward to seeing. We're doing Clubhouse tonight as a reminder. So Clubhouse will be at 7:00 Pacific Standard Time, and it's pure Clubhouse. It's not some kind of weird Zoom thing. I've given up on that. So we'll just do it as. I mean, I'll figure that out on the back channel. It does sound like there's rumors that Clubhouse is going to bring out its own tools. When we update Mukana with the panelist tools, we'll probably then go into something that's a little bit more set up there. So anyway, I'll see you. I'm going to jump into the post show.